Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the sales webinar series that we have here at the Center for Professional Selling at Ball State University. I'm your host, Deva Rangarajan, and today we actually have a Ball State alum, Mr. Jim Micklos, who is actually going to share some of his insights from his lot of years of work experience, but currently he is the Senior Vice President of Business Development at Fusion Marketing. So Jim Micklos, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Well, excited about the opportunity, Devin.
Jim, one of the topics which I really wanted to talk to you about, which is actually an area of expertise and passion that you have, is this idea of how do we motivate salespeople? Specifically, of course, if we try and take a look at it, there are what we say extrinsic motivations and intrinsic motivations, apart from what drives them internally. But what makes a lot of managers wonder is how can I get the incentive structure, PAT, in place so that I can get the most out of my sales organization. So essentially, that's what really interests me. Yes, it interests me that you need to keep your salespeople motivated, but it's the incentive part that I want to talk to you about as well.
Sounds good. Well, first off, I would say a quote by Warren Buffett is really pertinent here. And he said, people often say that motivation does not last. His response was, neither does bathing. That's why we need to do it every day.
That's a very nice way of putting it. So let me ask you about this. So essentially, you have made a career looking at incentives, right? Now, tell me, how does incentive shape the behaviors and performance of a sales organization?
Well, it's really interesting. You have to look at it. I always say it's a performance triad, or I say it takes all three.
Yeah.
Really, you need a sound compensation and incentive package, benefits, et cetera, to bring the employee into the organization. So you've got to make sure you're hiring the right people first. On top of that, you want to add recognition and incentives. Now, recognition is going to be for the best of the best, or for certain performance accomplishments that you want to recognize in front of peers. Doesn't necessarily have to be financial. The key part, though, is that you're recognizing their contributions and you're sharing it amongst the team. The incentive part of the equation is really important. This is where you know that if they've got this sound compensation package and they're already on some sort of bonus or incentive, cash incentive structure, it stops being the primary motivator along the way. And at a certain point in time, you need to do something on a non-cash basis. So we like to work with our clients and talk through, okay, you've got the right people in the organization. You've got some sort of President's Club or recognition scenario. What can we do for the entire sales audience? And the whole program design is the most critical part of the process. So we're going to ask questions about the client's business and what are their challenges and their objectives. And it's kind of like in the little elevator speech. What I say we do is we design custom solutions to our clients' most pressing sales challenges and marketing objectives to deliver performance improvement programs with predictable and measurable results and extraordinary ROI. So if you think about it, way back at the beginning, we're going to find out what their growth was past 2-3 years, look at the data for every salesperson in the organization, confirm what they want to do with what their organic growth expectations are, look at what competitors are doing, what's out there in the marketplace, and then prepare a financial model with a rule structure that says, and it's a campaign and not a contest. So in a President's Club recognition, you might recognize the top 10%. In a non-cash incentive, we want to recognize everybody that delivers the incremental growth required to pay for the award and drop a lot of money to the bottom line. So intrinsically, it's about making sure that you're taking care of the business needs and then setting an individual goal for every one of your performers, because I don't want them, they could always say, well, Jim's got the best territory, he always wins, and so does Deva, and I don't have a snowball's chance, and you don't want them to give up before they get started. So we generally recommend you offer it to everybody, and you know what the incremental ROI is going to be on each individual person. And Deva, it could kind of be like we would say, okay, the award is going to be a travel for two to Hawaii, group travel to Hawaii, or it might be $8,000 in points out of our merchandise catalog.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the point is it has to be motivating enough to drive that performance, but we'll know on an individual basis. The large performers may have to grow their business by 10% to qualify. The smaller territories may have to grow by a couple $100,000. So usually it's a percentage of or dollars of whichever is greater. So we know we've got the financial return to the company.
Indeed. Jim, this is very, very interesting, right? So essentially what you're saying is that apart from the cash and everything else, you're talking about non-cash reward kind of incentives as well. So if I were to have a catalog, what would that catalog look like, and how would I go about choosing the right reward? So you talked about certain things, right? So essentially whatever is relevant depending upon the size of the territory and all those. So how would you go about, what is your rule of thumb about choosing what is the right kind of reward for my kind of organization?
Well, we like to look at how are they currently being compensated? And in an organization that has a really strong compensation structure, you almost have to go to a group travel program where you can take the rep and their spouse or significant other on a group program where you can do all kinds of activities at the resort, helicopter rides, golf, spa, all kinds of special parties with entertainment, things they couldn't really pay for on their own. And that's how you motivate them. If we look at another organization that may include like their inside sales staff or their customer service staff, they're not making as much money, say, as the highly paid and compensated reps are. So there we could go to a catalog scenario. And typically in that catalog, it's kind of like an Amazon shopping experience. So you have your rules, you've achieved your goals and objectives, you've earned a certain amount of points, and besides anything you would want merchandise-wise in there, we typically include tickets to concerts and sporting events. We include some individual travel experiences. So if you wanted to go fly fishing in Canada, or you wanted to rent a helicopter in Vegas and fly up to the Grand Canyon, you know, things like that. And even we also put some charity offers into the play as well. So if somebody earned $5,000 worth of points, spent $4,800 and had $200 left, and they wanted to support the American Cancer Society or some local charity in their city, they could donate the points to that charity. And it's you get some really phenomenal community service type stories to tell when people choose to spend some of their points that way.
Actually, it's interesting you talk about this, Jim, and I know that this is not what we initially discussed as possible things to discuss, but I want to ask, do you see a difference between millennials and older professionals in what they prefer as non-cash rewards? Because I would imagine that things for, let's say, for example, that's got to do with societal awareness, societal consciousness, things like that. Again, this is maybe just me assuming things. Would that be something that appeals more to a millennial or a Gen Z audience rather than the typical older audiences?
Yeah, the older audiences tend to really resonate around those group travel programs. That is tradition in the industry, so to speak. The younger audience likes individual experiences, which is why in our catalog, we put things in like the fly fishing example that I gave. So there's a lot of different award opportunities in that catalog to fit just about anybody's desire. It's in there. Now we have to be careful because even if the company has a heavy percentage of millennials in their sales force, the group travel programs give management benefits that an individual experience does not. They can recognize everybody in front of their peers and in front of their spouse or significant other. You'd be surprised how much people will share stories about why they were successful and how they qualified for the travel award. So there's all kinds of benefits to group travel when you're looking at it from the company's perspective.
Yeah.
But anytime you're going to go with a non-group travel, and let's say you're going to give them thousands of dollars of merchandise, what you'll see there is the millennials tend to go for the experiences, where the older generations tend to like maybe get a new Bose stereo system with Apple products and TV and all that sort of thing.
But do you actually also see organizations mix and match both as well? So for
Sure.
example, so is that something, so how would they go about deciding how much should there be, let's say for example, a good mix of group stuff? Because I totally see the value of the group part. So that's where you have sharing of experiences, you're building team spirit. So you're just not thinking about that particular year, you're thinking about the future as well in terms of building that group of high performers and taking them through the process. I see the value of it, but I also see the value of, well, salespeople, you have this notion that they're lone wolves, they're out there. Again, I should be careful. It's not that lone wolves are going to work all the time, but the idea is that they're out there on the field by themselves, trying to bring in the business and all that kind of stuff. So essentially, where do you draw the line? Because I know that from a financial incentive perspective, there are things like group rewards and individual rewards and stuff like that. So do you also see the same thing in the non-financial reward space?
You do. The most critical thing in this program development is you want to make sure there's no weak links in the chain. So we have lots of clients that not only do they recognize and reward their outside sales reps, they do their inside, they do their customer service people. And
indeed,
some of the most effective programs also have an award-earning opportunity for the customers. So if the customers meet certain purchase goals, then they can travel with the rep on the group travel program, or they can earn points to redeem out of the catalog themselves. And so it really comes back to what are the company's objectives and what's the best way to go about doing that. And it has to be incrementally based. You know, it's got to be self-funding. So we can't have a scenario where the company incurs a lot of award expense, but doesn't grow the bottom line.
Which brings me to my next question, actually, because you talked earlier about this concept of ROI, return on investment, right?
Right.
So what literature, if any, and I'm an academic, so essentially you have to educate me on this, is we believe in a lot of proof that if you say that this is going to build up team morale and it's going to drive up your ROI, so what studies out there exist that shows that these kind of non-financial rewards, these kind of incentives actually increase a firm's ROI rather than a firm spending a lot of money on things and not getting returns?
Yeah, I can give you some examples on that. And then after this question, we should talk a little bit about benefits of non-cash versus cash.
Indeed.
So there's been studies done over the years, multiple studies. Two of the most famous are Goodyear Tire and Rubber and Mazda and Motors. And in each case, they took the audience and they split it in either halves or thirds. So there was a control group, and actually in each case thirds. There was a controlled group that was given nothing for their increased performance, but they just heard about we need to grow the business. Yeah. There was a group that was offered either merchandise or travel. One study was merchandise, the other was travel, and then there was the third group that was offered a cash incentive. Yeah. And I can speak from my own client experience too, and I will in a second. But in those two studies, in the Goodyear study, the non-cash group was up 32%. The cash group was up 12%. In the Mazda study, the non-cash was up 20%. The cash group was up 2%. And I have all sorts of studies, like let's talk about a customer program, for example. So you're offering incentives to the customer. It's either travel or merchandise. Every time we do that, the customer has to enroll in the program. Not all of them do. Some of them have code of conduct policies that prohibit them from taking awards and that sort of thing. But we always have a measurement of those customers that enrolled in the program versus those that did not. So I can tell you at the end of the program exactly what the enrolled group did versus the non-enrolled group. It's always greater and usually substantially greater. I can also mention that we've done these programs in every market condition out there: growing economies, flat economies, and declining economies. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people would think that, you know, the economy's tough right now. Why would I want to put an incentive out there? Well, the answer is there aren't a lot of orders on the street. And if that customer has 2 or 3 or 4 sources of supply, and you're the only one that has given them an opportunity to travel to Hawaii, those limited orders they have, they're going to shift them over to my client because they want to achieve that award. So some of the best programs actually operate in the most difficult conditions economically.
Indeed. But of course, the assumption here is that it's not that they just are going to give it to you, but all things being equal, that is the product quality, the level of support, all of that being equal, then a customer is more likely to reward one where they felt rewarded themselves without compromising on the quality of the offer. Is that correct? Because of course it then becomes a bribe, right? Because otherwise they cannot justify why they chose a particular supplier.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when you run a program, a customer program, you may have had a sales rep that's been calling on a potential customer for 3, 4, or 5 years and never got any of their business. But now they have a personal reason to buy from, and there's always all kinds of new customer engagement and support for the program. And sales reps love having the opportunity to present something that has that personal reason. We always say it gives the customer a personal reason to make the right business decision. They should be buying from our client anyways, all things equal.
Yeah.
Now they have a personal reason to do so.
Indeed. One of the things I want to talk to before we get into the other one is that one of the things I hear a lot, and maybe you are the best judge of it, is the fact that some of the younger people now saying that they want days off. So essentially the equivalent of, so one of the non-cash rewards would be the number of days off that they have. Is that something that you're also seeing, or is that not the norm as much?
There's conversations about that.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes down to it, especially with the pandemic impact we've had this year, people have a lot of flexibility nowadays in their work schedule, and employers understand that. And they want people that have earned awards to take the awards. They want them to have something memorable so that reinforces the relationship between the company and the participant. So management doesn't really want people taking more time off. What they want them doing is traveling, either group or individually, because those memories tend to build over time. You know, you take a group travel program to Hawaii, and 5 years later, people talk about it in even more glowing terms than when they first got back. Or somebody has thousands of dollars worth of points to redeem, and they redeem for a watch for their spouse, and golf clubs for themselves, and mountain bikes for the kids, and maybe something for the family room, a Bose stereo system with a flat panel TV or whatever. Well, guess what? Every time those people are using those things, it reminds them of the company, and that's a positive connection. So they'd rather have people have something tangible as opposed to taking more time off.
Now, one of the most important things when we talk about all this, right? So essentially we are actually doing some research projects right now on the concept of envy amongst the salespeople, saying that, okay, hey, if a person gets this kind of a unique opportunity, notwithstanding the fact that some people are always going to be envious. Envious could be both positive, that is, hey, I aspire to be like Jim. So Jim won the award, so I want to actually have a chance to do it next year. But envy could also result in bad things happening. So essentially you could be the target of people not being happy about it. And I know that it's not directly linked to the kind of work that you do, but I'm more curious to see, as a manager, how do I ensure that when I'm rewarding a salesperson, because it's a reward, right? It's based on, hey, you met your objectives, you went over and beyond what is expected of you, that kind of stuff. So what role does a manager play in making sure that the way we reward our salespeople are fair, just, transparent, and well communicated?
Well, that goes back to a comment I made earlier. I said campaigns versus contests. With contests, you have a fixed number of winners. So you may have a sales force of 500 people, but you've set a budget, which is one of the most common mistakes, and we should talk about that too, time permitting. But you have a fixed budget, and you know what the cost of the awards are, so you'll know right up front. Of those 500 people, maybe you're only going to reward 75. Well,
got it.
Even with all the transparency in the world, you're still going to have people that are envious and are irritated, frankly. So what you want to do, if you can, is figure out what growth is required that gives the company the ROI they're looking for, and then offer those rules to the entire 500 people. And if all 500 of them earn, great, because you know you're getting at least a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ROI on the program. And that eliminates the envy part of the equation. A recognition program, those have been around for years and years and years. And it could be, in the old days, it was a plaque. Now it might be a sculpture or a piece of crystal or something like that. But the fact is, if you have all three again, a sound compensation and benefit structure, a recognition of the top 10%, and then an incentive that's offered to all 100%, the envy usually goes away.
So that brings me to the next. So we talk about campaigns or contests. So obviously, in your opinion, campaigns are better. I agree with you. But should the campaigns be for a fixed amount of time, or should they be open all the time, saying that as long as you keep hitting the targets, you know what I mean? Should there be for a fixed amount of time?
Yeah, every program has to have a defined period of time. That being said, the best programs are offered year after year after year because you get the compounding growth impact. So, the business grows 15% in year one. Now everybody's goals are set based on that extra 15%. So now when they give you another 15% in year two, it's not 30%, but it's more like 38 or 40% because it was compounded on top of the prior year. So we're really careful in terms of the goal setting process, that structure, because that gets the results the customer is looking for with the ROI that they need as well. I always say predictable and measurable. And then the other thing, Deva, is the goals need to be challenging yet attainable. If we could, I'd like to read off of this document. I've got the 10 biggest mistakes when someone develops a program, because they're kind of interesting. The first is setting the budget first. You actually have to do the financial model and all the research first before you set the budget. And then number two is insufficient funding. If you're going to set a budget that's $1 million and it really needs to be $2 million, you're going to have a serious problem on your hand. Overly aggressive objectives and goals. That's where I say challenging yet attainable. We just mentioned contests versus campaigns. Some people, they're saying, well, it's a paycheck. They're already getting a paycheck. Why do you need an incentive on top of that? Well, as you know from Maslow's work, cash stops becoming a primary motivator at a certain point in time. Too many objectives are another common mistake. Silent programs fail. If you're not doing a good job of communicating the award earning opportunity and giving people periodic monthly reporting so they know exactly where they stand relative to their goal, you have a serious problem, because you have to promote these programs and keep it in front of people so they're engaged and motivated and et cetera. This is an interesting one. Energized incompetence. If you haven't done a good job of training your people and they don't know what they're doing, you throw an incentive at them. That's just, they're just now like incompetence on steroids, right?
Yes.
I mean,
indeed. But Jim, hold on that point.
Ninth is know your audience. And 10th is, and this is kind of interesting, exaggerating promises from performance improvement companies. So I'm not saying that my company does that, but some of the companies that are out there exaggerate what they're capable of doing to prospective clients.
I'm sorry, I interrupted because there's one point which I thought was very, very interesting is that you talked about incompetence and then trying to reward incompetence. So trying to put them on hyper. Actually, that's very interesting because I think of what issues you had with, I don't know if it was rewarding it, but actually in terms of setting the right kind of KPIs with what happened with Wells Fargo, right? Essentially, that's you set up those kind of situations where you give them unrealistic goals.
Yep.
And you're actually, in this case, is that, okay, you hit these unrealistic goals, only then you have a chance of getting that non-financial incentives. But then it's almost like you're encouraging the non-competent ones to try and engage in unethical behaviors.
Yep.
That could come to bite you in the behind. So is that something? So what would you advise to them in terms of saying, at what point do you have to draw the line and make sure that it does not result in your salespeople engaging in unethical behaviors?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, but we call it gaming the system.
Yeah.
So what could possibly, with bad behavior, enable somebody to earn the reward when they don't deserve it? And it could be like in a customer program, there's 2 branch locations in the same city, and they're buying a small amount of goods from one and a large from the other. Well, all they have to do is shift where they're buying from. They haven't grown their business, but now they've won the award. The company's incurred the expense, and somebody gamed the system. So in the Wells Fargo example, it was all those people setting up all those fictitious accounts.
Indeed, yeah.
And so we always do a brainstorming session with our client before we launch the program about what could possibly go wrong here and how could people try to earn the award when they don't really deserve it.
Yeah. Jim, the another question I have actually is that, see, in the domain that I'm in, so mostly in my experience in the past, we worked with a lot of companies that have transitioned from selling products to selling more value-added services and moving towards solution selling and stuff like that. Not solution selling as in one particular consulting organization saying this is solution selling. What do I mean by solution is that you're moving away from a traditional product. You're starting to sell a complete package that the customer buys into, which then suddenly means that you're gone from an individual effort into a kind of a group effort where, of course, the salesperson is responsible for the sale, but you need a set of other people who are playing support roles. And you sort of hit on it before, but how would I then come up with these kind of incentive structures for team-based efforts where not all the team members are equally committed to the sale? I mean, you know what I mean, in terms of our held accountable based on that sale.
Yeah, I totally understand. And you think of it in a couple ways. The first thing is there's certain steps to the sale that you have to go through. So sometimes, we know, like, let's say, for example, you make a presentation. Then the next step would be they come to your headquarters to take an office tour. And then they check your references, and then you make the sale. Well, one of the things we'll do is we can award incremental awards as they're working their way to the actual sale. So that's one thing. The second thing is with sales reps, when possible, let them have their own award earning opportunity. Go back to everybody else that supports them, create a group-oriented goal for those people, which can include everybody that's supporting them in the office. So it would be the customer service, the inside sales reps,
indeed,
accounting, warehouse folks, truck drivers. And what happens is you get this peer pressure that those people are putting on the rep because they want the rep selling more so that everybody can earn. Now, in terms of when you talk about selling solutions as opposed to product, of course, most buyers now, especially the young buyers, they've already done their research in terms of the product. So what most of our clients are doing is they're thinking about ways to provide those value-added services. And the salesperson selling them, the support people are delivering those services. So it could be you're maintaining inventory near the job site so that when the customer needs it, it's available quickly. But they're not paying for it until they actually take possession of it. Another thing would be there's a huge emphasis nowadays on motivating customers to do more online with all the efficiencies that people are seeing there. And then the whole value-added service thing, especially with distributors that are selling to contractors, they have to figure out what services they can provide that's part of the package price to earn the business. They want to get away from people buying based on price, and they want them to be thinking in terms of value.
Oh, wow. No, this is really, really good. And actually, one of the last questions I have in the interest of time, which is got to do with performance management. And there is this new is a big word, but this is focus a lot more now based on looking not at lag indicators like revenues and margins to try and see whether you've hit the targets or not, but because it's too late by then. But if you're running a campaign rather than a contest, and you want everybody, as an organization, you want everybody to have a chance to win that campaign, because if everybody's winning the campaign, they are putting in the collective effort to raise the bar in terms of how we perform, right? So now, with that in mind, if that is the case, waiting for actual performance to occur and then reward is actually looking at lag indicators, right? Are you hitting your numbers and stuff like that? So do you actually see a lot more of the move towards performance management, basing it more on the activities that salespeople are doing, so that you have some sort of a leading indicator so that the reps can be coached towards achieving those kind of objectives?
Yeah, when you talk about steps to the sale, as we discussed, and then you combine that with, even though they have annual goals, but say quarterly goals, now what you've done is you're fast forwarding the work they need to do early to help win long term. So we have a client that we're launching a program on January 1st for all their salespeople and all their support people. They have an annual goal to hit. If they hit that goal, that's where they're going to earn the biggest percentage of points. They also have goals for every quarter. So each quarter, we're emphasizing they are at least 25% of the way to their annual goal. And we're also going to pay them a consistency bonus. So if they hit all 4 quarters, they can actually win 6 multiples of the award. Each 4 quarters, the consistency bonus, and then the annual overall goal. And the consistency bonus and the annual overall have twice the reward payout that the individual quarters do, because ultimately that's what's most important.
Fantastic. And this is interesting, right? So when you do this, so is this the organization that you're going to do this for? Is this an organization where the salespeople get this, but then because at the end of the day is that the salesperson is responsible for incrementally progressing the sale, whereas the support is much more where they come in as and when they're needed. So they're not necessarily there consistently. So is this a situation where, if you have a situation like that, where the salesperson is rewarded the way you're talking about, but then the group gets rewarded based on the annual part? Am I correct that that would how you would suggest doing it?
No, we give the group quarterly goals as well.
Oh, wow. So,
and the reality of it is, when you're in sales, you're in front of the customer a certain period of time, but they're calling your office, and the customer service people and the inside sales reps are frankly talking to the customer more often than the outside sales rep is. Now, without the outside sales rep, though, you know what I'm aiming for the other 2 groups of people to do. So you've got to reward the outside sales rep, more than you do the rest. But those support folks are critical to the overall performance.
Fantastic. Jim, thank you so much. This was very, very, very enlightening. And I like the 10 things because you're a Ball State grad. I teach at Ball State. We know David Letterman had his top 10 in India. So essentially it kind of reminds me of the Ball State. David Letterman.
I actually modeled it off of Letterman. He was a fraternity brother of mine, just a few years older. So I never actually had a chance to meet him. But
okay. So,
but I did do the top 10 mistakes after him.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for taking time off
My pleasure.
Schedule, and good luck with all these kind of, well, not that luck has anything to do with, but what can I say? It'll be very interesting to see the outcomes and maybe have a conversation about this particular case where you're rolling it out and see how it pans out at the end of a year as well. So thank you so much for your time, Jim.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thanks. And that's folks, stay tuned for more sessions like this with very, very interesting topics like Jim just shared.